In this video, I'll be ranking every main Geometry Dash level using a tier list based on 4 criteria: enjoyability, decoration, memorability, and how well they introduce new mechanics. Let's get straight into the first level. Stereo Madness is the first level you will ever play, and RobTop understands that it's necessary to not just make the level easy, but also give you ample time to react and introduce mechanics in a way that won't confuse new players, even at the cost of making it boring for those used to the game. The first ship part is a prime example of this, providing a large open space and very few obstacles, giving you plenty of space to figure out how the ship moves. It probably should have gotten tighter near the end though. The second half of SM has far more movement, elevation change, and overall excitement as the main jumping mechanics were already introduced in the first. I like this part of the level, although the 2 triple spikes, despite being nerfed, feel like unnecessary choke points. The last ship is fine. Overall, a solid level, although it could have been a little better. A tier. Back on Track introduces one new mechanic, the jump pad, and it does this in a pretty good way, putting one almost immediately after the level starts and having it vault you over a row of spikes, giving the player a pretty good idea of what these are supposed to do. The problem is, there isn't anything else of that kind for a very long time. The pre-drop drags on for way too long and is filled by boring gameplay with a few pads sprinkled in. RobTop would have done well to add a few fakes here and there, kinda like Dreamland except not as obnoxious. I like that the ship part is more dynamic than those in Stereo Madness, although you could add some difficulty to it. The ending cube part is pretty fun, but that's mostly coasting on the stress of being far into the level. BOT's major failing is that it isn't very exciting and doesn't make use of tricks, making it a pretty easy level, in my opinion easier than Stereo Madness. Sure, it has good mechanics introduction, but it's also boring and pretty forgettable. D tier. Poltergeist's new feature is the yellow jump ring, and by throwing some in at the beginning and having a helpful on-death effect, it's able to show you how to use them. It also has decent sync and a really cool song that carries the entire level. The developer also decided to include jump rings into the tricks department for a grand total of 1 fake! Seriously, you've got plenty of time in the pre-drop, add some more, this is boring. Also, I know that GD is a game meant for 10-year-olds, but that doesn't mean that the ship part has to look like it was designed by a 10-year-old. The part after the drop has that decent sync I mentioned, but other than that, Poltergeist is pretty mid. C tier. Dryout has one of my favorite songs used in a RobTop level, and at first it doesn't really seem like that exciting of a level. However, the buildup of the song, combined with the change in background color and the layout becoming more dynamic, sort of creates an atmosphere of impending doom, which comes as soon as you reach the drop. The first ever upside down part was an absolute gauntlet to me the first time I beat the level, and even though that came as a massive difficulty spike at the time, I didn't mind. The cube parts afterwards seem pretty simple, but after getting through the hardest part of the level, they both make you butt clench as you try not to mess this opportunity up. The problem with the ship part is that it's way too easy, even in the part with actual spikes. It needed to be made far tighter to make the player nervous when they got there. Overall, I'd give Dryout a solid B tier. Up next is Ultimate Destruction. Cant Let Go? Right, base after base. What's that level again? BAB doesn't have any new mechanics to introduce, so it needs to make creative use of existing ones to build an interesting and difficult level. Sadly, it does not. The whole level is pretty underwhelming, with everything done in the long cube part feeling like it's been done before. The base after base track is energetic. The level needs to be off the rails, with crazy tricks happening all over the place, like the upside down part in Cant Let Go. But the 5th official level doesn't capture the energy of its song, and just seems like your generic 1.0 map. The ship is no better. Seriously, what is it with RobTop and making the easiest ship parts ever? The one cool part in the entire almost minute-and-a-half long level is this upside down part, which of course was already done in Dryout. The fact that this level is so easy and boring is probably a big reason why CLG seems so difficult in comparison. I simply can't find anything to like about this level, so I'll be putting it in the bottom tier. Everything I complained about with the cube parts in earlier levels not being hard enough doesn't exist for Cant Let Go. It's full of tight gaps to keep you on your toes, and also a grand total of 1 fake. Why aren't you using these more? They're pretty much the only thing you had to work with in 1.0. Then you've got the dark part, which is reused from base after base, but is way better because it has good sync. but it also drags on for way too long without any real difficulty. RobTop usually cuts part out of the tracks he uses for Geometry Dash, so why couldn't he do the same and cut this dark part in half? You're basically guaranteed to reach the upside down cube once you get here because the ship part is also handed to you on a silver platter, making it kinda boring to have to sit through all of this just to die at one part over and over. The middle's lack of difficulty ruins the upside down part, which would otherwise be pretty fun. I'm gonna put this in C tier below Poltergeist because of its massive problems. I think Jumper has the most innovative cube gameplay thus far. Whereas other levels had distinct parts of upside down and right side up cube gameplay, Jumper sprinkles them together in the same section and uses a close wall to create a cramped environment where you have to think on your feet to judge whether to jump or fall, using the space pretty well. After some more cube GP, the level shows you how to use the upside down ship by giving you an open space to fly through, then repeating the same thing upside down, and adding more difficulty in the second half. I think this is a pretty nice introduction. The square section after that is pretty normal up until around 50%, where you're placed in a tight corridor where you have to react quickly and even make a few buffer clicks to stay alive. The last ship section is also pretty easy, but it's kinda fun as well. Screw Deadlock, this is the real first boss fight in GD. The final cube keeps the tension with a triple and an upside down part with the same qualities mentioned for the beginning of the level. I believe that Jumper is almost perfect, and for that reason I'll be giving it the first S tier of the video. Every level needs 10 triples. I'm not sure why RobTop decided that the only way to add difficulty to his levels was to spam a bunch of triple spikes, but I'm sure glad it ended. Like, the first part of the level is pretty fun, but you didn't need to throw all of them in here. And closer to the end, there are even triples placed after a transition through a mirror portal, so you have to watch the animation and then time your jump. And of course, this last upside down cube, which is already hard enough, throws in another 2 triple spikes at the end. Jesus Christ, RobTop, what the fuck is this? And now that I've introduced mirror portals, it's probably time to address them. Everyone hates mirror portals, and so they're almost never used, and everyone also gets mad when someone does use them. But I think the feature is overhated. For example, the fact that you have to do the ship section in reverse is a really fun concept. It's just that when people think of mirror portals, they think of the way they were used in levels like the Lightning Road. But of course, with Time Machine, there's also the aforementioned mirror portal into triple spike transitions that really suck. The level isn't without some redeeming qualities, but it's quite telling that I have an older brother who's beaten Fear Me but not Time Machine. I don't think anyone would disagree with me putting this level in E tier. Almost every main level introduces you to some sort of new mechanic. Stereo Madness introduces you to the game, Poltergeist introduces you to jump rings, Time Machine introduces you to the mirror portal, and Cycles introduces you to Little Timmy map pack levels. Like, could you please quit it with this shit? We've had enough of triple spikes. Cycles also serves as the debut of the ball game mode and does so in the most boring way possible. It gives you 3 seconds of waiting before every click. This isn't back on track, you don't need to wipe my ass the whole time. The first ball part should have looked more like the second one to not be completely boring. The level's saving grace comes in the last third of it. This ship is very well synced. I found it very challenging when first beating it, and felt like a badass when I could do it consistently. Then you've got the final ball, which is great. The first one should have been like this. This is also another good use of the mirror portal. However, no matter how good these 2 parts were, it's not enough to lift Cycles out of E tier, though I will place it above Time Machine. X-Step is the first level to make use of objects that can be described as decoration, with air deco throughout the level and different block types used later on. I also think that the ball structuring is nice and pretty clever too. As for the gameplay, the first part is really nice to watch with the song and plays well also. The drop ship part has an interesting gimmick to it. You're supposed to avoid the blue pads, as otherwise you get sent upside down, making it harder to maneuver your ship. The problem, though, with the beginning of the level, is that there isn't enough difficulty to prepare you for what comes next. The cube section around halfway through, being full of fakes, blind jumps, and leaps of faith, seems out of place in a relatively easy level, as afterwards it goes straight back into the previous difficulty level. Despite this, I'm still gonna put X-Step in A tier. Clutterfunk starts off with a cube part with very good sync, and throughout the pre-drop uses things like color changes and mirror portals to add to this. The next part introduces 2 new things, the black block type and the mini portal. A mini cube part is very good with difficulty and keeping up with the fast-paced atmosphere of the song. There's then a ship part before the drop, which isn't anything special, but makes sense with the song. The ball part afterwards is at an insane point in the Clutterfunk track and fits in very well with it, also using a new type of block. The next black section is just as good as the first one, where you're a mini ship and have to delicately maneuver through the corridor dodging saw blades. Finally, there's the infamous cube part at the end. The beginning gave me a hell of a time getting through these tight timings, but I enjoyed the memory stuff afterwards. Overall, Clutterfunk is one of the best synced RobTop levels, makes great use of mini gameplay, and is just as good with new decoration as X-Step. For these reasons, I've decided to put it at S tier. Theory of Everything is an iconic level in GD. Whenever the game was popular in your middle school, you were basically a legend if you could pass the first cube. And then there's of course the up gang versus down gang in the first ship. TOE introduces the UFO game mode and with it these cool brick blocks, as well as being able to change the color of the outlines of blocks. Other than that, I'm not sure what else to say about Theory of Everything. It's got solid gameplay all around and is pretty good in the other metrics as well, A tier. Up next is Electroman Adventures. The only new introduction gameplay-wise is these breakable blocks which aren't used a whole lot in RobTop levels. What the 1.6 update was really about is decoration, and we see a whole lot of that in this level. It's possibly the best looking RobTop level, which is really impressive considering how early in the list we still are. And Electroman Adventures is similarly strong in the gameplay department. The beginning is your typical RobTop level first cube section, which heads into a mini-ship which is challenging but also fun. All of this type of miniature cube part in EA are really well synced and exciting to play with these tiny jumps and blue orbs. There isn't a whole lot to say about the two ball sections, so all that's left to discuss is the UFO and ship sections in the middle of the map. I like the gameplay in the first UFO because you sort of have to time your flaps to avoid hitting the spiked ceilings, but not so much the others. The sections on screen now are really copy and pasted despite being mostly fun to play, and also resembles the floppy trend, which is absolutely disgusting. Overall, I'd give the gameplay a solid A tier, but the deco and song an easy S tier. So I'm going to put Electroman at the top of the current list. Clubstep isn't really focused on decoration. That being said, the level looks completely fine. It's nothing to write home about, but not bad either. If I were rating these solely based on how they look, I would give this an acceptable C tier. However, there's another factor that's far more important for a level like Clubstep, the gameplay. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I do not care for any of the GP in any of the RobTop demons. I don't think that this was really meant to be a good level, it was just intended to be a difficult demon, and in that regard, I think he did a good job. However, it's possible to make a hard level that's also fun. Clubstep fails here due to poor balancing. Aside from the UFO part at 55, 90% of the gameplay comes from the level's many ship sections, which is a pretty big deal when a good part of the demon is made up of cube gameplay. Every second of this is completely unchallenging and often boring. The ship parts, on the other hand, are all quite hard and feel like a bunch of difficulty spikes. For starters, the first ship at 30% is basically impossible until you grind it in practice mode for half an hour, and then it's completely free after that. Then there's this 1 to 2 click ship that's super inconsistent. This ship, which is actually pretty fun and the right level of difficulty, this section which might work if the rest of the level was this difficult, and then the crazy part around 89%, which is a massive spike that kills you so many times. I also died at 96 and again at 97, so I really didn't have a good time on this level. D tier. If you're enjoying the first 14 minutes of the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. I try to upload commentary videos every week and am mostly successful. Now back to the official levels tier list. Throughout the last year, I've uploaded a bunch of terrible opinions, and you guys have stuck with my channel regardless. But this one is going to be the last straw. It's time to unsubscribe and call me out on Twitter. Electrodynamics is a terrible level. It's boring, and 1.7 deco is atrocious. I'm probably the only person in the universe who has this opinion, but just hear me out. The first cube is kinda lame, there isn't anything that fun about it. The drop to the end of the UFO is alright, it's got some interesting and challenging ideas, but it's straight downhill when you reach the dark cube. It's completely free. It's fine to put a difficulty break, but at least make it slightly conceivable that the player could die here to make it intense and nerve-wracking. Instead, it's incredibly dull, as you know you're gonna have to sit through 20 seconds of this just to die at the ship. Yeah, as with Clubstep, the last two ships are huge difficulty spikes. The last two cube parts are actually difficult and make the end stressful, but by then it's too little too late. And now the decoration. As I stated earlier, 1.7 levels can only be described as utter abominations. The mixture of these block designs and these weird air decorations makes them extremely ugly. Electrodynamics is 10 times better than those levels, and I still think it's mid. It's all either a mess of these blocks I just talked about, or these pillars copy and pasted around this boring cube and ball part. I'm undecided on whether to put this in D or E tier. Ah, fuck it. I talked a lot of shit about the decoration and Electrodynamics, but thankfully, Rob got his act together for Hexagon Force. Every new block is used in a much nicer way, and the whole level looks really clean. A tad basic at times, but clean. Another thing significantly improved from Electrodynamics is the gameplay. The first ship part is pretty annoying, but once you reach the first duel it gets better. The layout has perfect pacing, moving along with the energy and progression of the song. It feels like Hexagon Force is a journey, and I'd be down if RobTop had decided to make it an XL level. Now let's talk about the parts themselves. I really like that the first duel was an asymmetrical one. By doing this, RobTop is showcasing the true potential of duel mode while still making the part fair and easy to read aside from one irritating bug. Every other duel, both symmetrical and asymmetrical, is also a strong part. I also like the gimmick that was used in this ship part that makes the player need to be wary of the slopes in order to avoid flying out of bounds. The use of slopes later on is cool as well. And this last ship part, mwah. This is what I mean by a perfect last stressful section at the end. All in all, Hexagon Force has decent deco and good gameplay, so I'll put it at a comfortable B tier. Okay, time to talk about Blast Processor. Well, you see, the song starts with Bwomp, which is a funny joke, therefore S tier. Just kidding. To be honest, B tier is one of the most boring official levels. I'll spare you my usual whining about the first cube as it's starting to sound like a broken record, so instead I'll jump straight into how RobTop chose to introduce the wave game mode. You might crash here once or twice before getting your bearings, but after that it's a total cakewalk and there's nothing challenging about it whatsoever. Almost the entire level is like this, making it incredibly boring to sit through on your way to dying to something stupid. Blast Processing is essentially a 4-star level with 3 or 4 choke points. The first 2 of these are scuffed transitions in and out of dual wave and the difficult adjustment to dual wave, and the sort of tight UFO corridors that make you slightly time your flaps. A better level could have been made if RobTop removed all difficulty and made this the type of level you can beat in one attempt. The only gameplay I can see that isn't generic is this part here, featuring experimentation with slopes for some pretty interesting level design. Unfortunately, that's not enough to change the fact that Blast Processing is an uninspired level with little that you're likely to remember. However, one thing that it does quite well is the decoration. Across the board, RobTop demonstrates a wealth of interesting ideas to try with the canvas of the 1.9 editor. Sadly, everyone ignored this and either made a Hell-themed level, a 9 Circles level, or both. I'm going to put Blast Processing at C tier. I have half a mind to give it a D tier even, but I think the deco partially makes up for the boring gameplay. Theory of Everything 2 is RobTop's second demon level and is very faithful to the original, being just as unbalanced as Clubstep. We get an easy cube, a tricky ship, a kinda challenging UFO, an easy ball, an easy cube, a super difficult ship with lots of choke points, a sort of difficult cube, a ball maze, a fun but pretty easy wave, a difficult 4-second ship, a break with an easy cube, another ship with choke points, and finally the last 10% suddenly becomes slightly harder than the rest of the demon. I died over 30 times to the last 30% of Toe 2. That was not fun. Similarly to Clubstep, the decoration is also mid, but on the other hand, I don't think that the imbalance is quite as frustrating here, despite the fact that I think that this level is harder, so I'll put Theory of Everything 2 in C tier. Up next is Geometrical Dominator. For most people making a similar tier list, a review of this level would simply entail ranting about the dark part and then putting it in F tier. but I really don't think that it ruins the level as much as some people claim. Yes, it is a terrible part. It intended to create difficulty by requiring players to use sharp reflexes and quick reaction time, but instead ended up forcing them to rely on muscle memory by grinding it in practice mode for a long time. However, this is a mere stain on an otherwise almost perfect level. The robot starts out easy and gets more dynamic later on once you've learned the mechanics. The way it introduces move triggers is far less obnoxious than expected of early 2.0 levels and is only annoying on one occasion here. Other successes of GD include fun and interesting ship, robot, and wave gameplay, and fun incorporation of keys and toggle triggers to make a really cool gimmick near the end. The decoration is also impeccable, using the new grass, brick, mechanical, and other textures in beautiful ways. I think RobTop might be the only creator who's ever used rainbow blocks in a way that actually looks good. If it weren't for the stupid memory part, I would probably put this in S tier, but although it doesn't completely ruin the level, it impedes it enough that I'm going to knock it down to high A tier. We are now reviewing the hardest main level, Deadlocked. I recently started trying to beat this as a new hardest demon, as I wanted to get a feel for the gameplay before making a review. The reason why I didn't go for it sooner? For that, I'd like to call your attention to the wave section from 12% to 20%. I've said a lot about how the other demons are super unbalanced, but this one wave part takes the prize. I've been playing from zero for quite a while now, and this section still accounts for about half of my normal mode deaths. After the wave, it transitions back into easy demon gameplay through I Like This Part and the boss fight. Then it's back to medium hard demon difficulty with an awkward transition into another difficult wave and then a difficult ship which is also a chore to learn. Then we finish with more easy demon gameplay. Overall, there are parts of Deadlock that are fun, and the level as a whole has an intense atmosphere, but it's just too unbalanced for me to enjoy. If the second wave was near the end, I probably would have put this in E tier, but instead I'll place it just above Clubstep. Finger Dash is the most recent RobTop level, and therefore has the most updated decoration options, so that's the first thing I'm going to talk about. Throughout the pre-drop, it uses rock blocks and electricity, even including rising lava later on, giving it a nice atmosphere similar to that in something like a volcano. It uses this throughout much of the level, occasionally using different types of rock blocks to spruce it up, although some of these choices were kinda ugly. Also in the second half, we occasionally see parts using brick blocks, the robot, final UFO, and the final cube. Overall, the deco looks really good despite a few blemishes. Now let's talk about the gameplay. In my opinion, the pre-drop drags on for way too long. RobTop should have cut more of that part of the song out. I do like the way he introduces the dash orb. The first one or two are fairly easy to understand, so you know what's going on before he starts using them normally. That's about all there is to say about the first cube. I'm not such a big fan of this use of the spider game mode. It's got the difficulty, but I feel that it does it in the wrong way, with tight timings rather than fast or intense gameplay, making it boring, especially when you die. I really like the ship on the other hand. It's pretty cool how you have to fly around dodging fireballs. We then get a difficulty break with a cool sync-based robot going into the wave. IMO, everything from here to the end is the best part of the level. It's not too hard, but not too easy either, just enough trickiness to make it an intense ending. I actually died to the UFO my first time through, but managed not to choke on the last cube. Not the best RobTop level, but pretty good. I'll give Finger Dash a high B tier. Wow, that was a long video. If you made it to the end, you'll probably enjoy some of my other countdown videos, so I've left the playlist on screen for you to check out. Be sure to tell me which of my placements you agree and disagree with, as well as what you might have done differently in the comments. Consider leaving a like and subscribing for more videos like these. See you in 2.2 for the updated version. Thanks for watching.